Hey everybody, how's it going? I always feel like I gotta lean into this mic, so I'm gonna try to resist. Let me know if it's too quiet or too loud. I'm gonna pull up the chat here. Okay, here we go. Good evening. How's it going? Um, Not a comic related, but I think as I did after seeing the Hateful Eight all those years ago, I just saw the new Tarantino flick, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I'm just bursting to talk a little bit about it. I'm going to try to keep it as spoiler free as possible, but I can't make any promises. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want to find out any potential spoilers, or you want to go in completely kind of dry, I'd suggest not watching. Just turn it off. I won't be offended. Um, all I saw for this was the trailer a couple of times before going in. I knew a little bit about it. I didn't know very much. I knew roughly the era that it was set, and I knew roughly the kind of both real and made up characters that were going to be a part of this. Um, the title itself didn't make much sense. Sort of made sense, but once the end of the movie came, once I'd seen the whole thing, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a perfect title for this. Um, so just to start with, uh, Once Upon a Time at the Towne Cinema. So here in Winnipeg, there's a movie theater called the Towne Cinema 8, and it's right downtown on Notre Dame, right across the road from one of the comic shops that I go to visit, which is right down the road from my office. One of the things with the Towne Cinema, it's been there forever. When I was doing a little bit of research, online. Apparently, it opened August 21st, 1981, according to one of the sites that I found. Approximately 30,000 square feet, 2,200 seats. There's 8 theaters, hence the name Towne Cinema 8. I went a few times as a kid. I started going more as I got older, and I've seen plenty of movies there, including Pulp Fiction twice, and both times the lineups were out the door and down the road and around the corner. It was an experience. When I missed seeing Reservoir Dogs in the theater, but I was taking a kind of introductory film course at the time downtown Winnipeg at the Winnipeg Film Group, just as Pulp Fiction was about to hit the theaters. So a lot of the talk was about Reservoir Dogs. I had seen Reservoir Dogs, I just hadn't seen it in the theaters. I saw it a little later, kind of just before Pulp Fiction hit the theaters. I saw it. Um, so it was kind of the talk of everywhere that this was a movie that people had to see. When we lived in Ontario, I went to film school in Toronto for a year, and it was the talk of Tarantino was the talk of that school as well. And some of the teachers told us that actually, when Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction came out, it kind of made their lives a living hell for a while, because everybody who came in to the school wanted to be the next Tarantino. So they spent a lot of time trying to listen. We're talking about filmmaking where, they just had everybody wanted to be a director, first of all, at that school, and then secondly, everybody wanted to be Tarantino, and it drove them a little crazy, and I can absolutely see that. So at the Town Cinema, it's pretty much mandatory that you smuggle booze in. It's almost, they may as well have it written on the marquee. You just have to do it. Uh, how many people do it, I don't know. I know that I do it. I know that me and my friends have done it every time we've come. Oh, 64-page special. How are you? Um, So it's one of those places that you just do that. The last experience that I had was with a friend of mine at bowling. We went to see The Witch there, and because it is right downtown, there's kind of oftentimes there's some questionable clientele that come in there, let's just say. So we sat at the back as we usually do with our paper bags and our smuggled in booze, just being discreet, not making a show of it, and not being jackasses. As the movie's starting, a woman comes in who was in the show before us. Next thing we know, she's crawling on her hands and knees in the aisle in front of us, digging under the seats between our legs and stuff. To which both of us immediately stood up and walked out of the aisle going, what the fuck? This is a setup. It turns out she had lost her phone. She was absolutely hammered. Again, this is downtown Winnipeg. I know all of you don't live in Winnipeg. Downtown Winnipeg can be a little rough. So it immediately kind of what's going on and just how incredibly dangerous that was for her to be acting in the way that she was in a theater in the state that she was. So this is the theater. I think it's incredible when I go to see movies there, as happened tonight. Yes, it's a Wednesday night, so it's not exactly prime time for people seeing movies, but there was about 8 other people in the theater with me and my wife, which I love. When we got there, there was 15 minutes before the show started. We were the only ones in the theater. It costs $5.25 to get in, I think, during the week. I don't know how much it costs on Tuesdays, but again, this is a movie that just came out. You're not getting the Dolby surround big IMAX screen experience, none of that. But a movie like this doesn't need that. If anything, the atmosphere of this movie is what made it even more enjoyable for us. So the history of the Towne cinema, again, opened in 1981. Apparently, from the little bit of information, it was Canada's first standalone multiplex. Now, that can be debated because I think there was a theater called the Garrick that I think was before that. Anyway, who was first, who was second, all aside, the town itself has had a bit of a history in as much as it's always shown a wide variety of movies. In most recent years, it shows kind of more mainstream, but throughout its history, I believe it's shown everything from like mainstream blockbuster to like from like Raiders of the Lost Ark, etc., to kind of foreign films, and I believe they even dipped their toes into kind of some triple X stuff back in the day as well, to some stuff that was maybe a little more seedier, to say the least. So they're not one particular set of movies that show at this place. Um, so again, it was a no-brainer that this is where we had to see. We live really, really close to kind of one of the big. It's called Scotiabank Theater at the big mall here. It used to be called Silver City. So kind of the big theater where you're getting the IMAX 3D, you're getting all this stuff. It was playing there. This one was cutting it a bit close as far as timeline went. It started at 6, so we had to hustle a little bit to get down there. But I am so incredibly glad that we came to see this here. Um, Hateful Eight didn't impress me at all for a number of reasons, which I'm not going to kind of rehash here. If you're curious, dig way back into the archives, into however many years ago that was, 2, 3 years ago, and you can find my completely dissatisfied conversation about that piece of crap. Um, this one completely blew me away. It wipes out anything, any kind of bad taste that Hateful Eight left in my mouth over these past few years. This was an absolutely incredible movie. So, again, without getting too much into details, I think one of the biggest things that works for me is with Tarantino's stuff, depending on the movie. For example, Jackie Brown, people rave about that movie. It didn't do too much for me, and I think part of the reason is that I've never been a huge fan of blaxploitation movies. I've seen a number, I enjoy them. I don't know much about that world, so I feel with Tarantino's stuff, especially the newer stuff, it helps if you kind of are a little bit deeper into what he's covering. Again, personally, I feel that's the case. This one, because it's based in kind of TV westerns, and they touch on spaghetti westerns, and they touch on going to Italy to shoot a bunch of movies, including some police dramas and stuff like that. Um, there was more in here that I could kind of latch on to, that I kind of recognized. The one thing that only kind of jumps out at me right at this moment sitting here is there's music in it for sure, but there's not as much. I'd have to see it again, and I will be seeing it again. There's not as much music in this one as there was in previous movies. This is a visual kind of feast. The entire 2 hours, and I think it's 2 hours and 41 minutes, something like that, is just dripping with atmosphere. There is everything that puts you in that time frame. Um, and yes, there is. It's not like there's no music, but it doesn't play as big of a role, or at least it didn't appear that way to me on the first watching, as big of a role as it has in some of his other movies. This one was all about bringing you into that world visually, and by the way that people are dressing, and the kind of interactions, and seeing the hippies, and seeing, they take you to Spawn Ranch and all this kind of thing. um, but it really is Tarantino's uh, version of Hollywood, because at the end of the day, this is about this actor who has kind of made a name for himself in kind of 50s and 60s TV westerns, and is now at another stage of his career where he's starting to feel a little irrelevant and still trying to find a niche. At the end of the day, it's about a motherfucker at work, in a job, trying to still make a paycheck, and trying to still feel like he's contributing something, to make him feel like he's contributing something. He just places it in this kind of Hollywood of old, as he's kind of mixing in with these other people. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be careful, because again, I don't want to kind of throw things out there that are going to ruin the experience for those of you that want to see it. Um, I just think it was so amazingly well done, because of how he handled all this kind of stuff that happened in kind of history. Um, it's not a docudrama. It's taking a chunk in time. It's set in a very specific time period, with some real kind of life people making appearances. And now that I'm, again, one of those things that I'm sitting here thinking about, when I was watching it, there's a couple of actors that play the roles of famous people, and I thought they were really weak, as far as they didn't really look like them. They didn't really, but now as I'm speaking this other stuff, it completely makes sense, because that's kind of a big part of it, that yes, this is about a chunk in time, but it's not about recreating that chunk in time as far as the characters go. It's about creating this world, and honestly, these kind of peripheral characters who are famous don't fucking matter, because it's about these guys and their place, and them kind of moving through this new phase in time and their life. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just I'll be seeing it again. There's no doubt in my mind. I will be seeing it. I will be smuggling in booze again, and I'll be getting drunk off my ass again in the theater, watching this another time. Highly, highly recommended. And it's one of those things that I can't wait until a bunch of people I know see it, so I can talk a little more freely. Because there's some things I just think he did so expertly, and they were such a kind of fuck you to some of these peripheral historical things, that I think is brilliant. Um, and again, out of all of his movies, where it really is his interpretation of a time period, I don't know if one has captured it so well as this one. That fuck all that other shit that you think you know about it. This is my memory of this time period. This is my Hollywood. This is my chunk of how this was important, and all that other shit that everybody knows about, that's not important. This is what's important. And I love that about it. One of the other things I will kind of briefly say is I think that, again, as in with Death Proof, because I really like Death Proof a lot as well. The theatrical version, anyway, that was a little shorter, the one that was part of the double feature. When I watched it again on DVD, it was the longer cut. I didn't like it as much. I thought the shorter version was a lot better in that movie, like in this one. There's some payoffs for me as someone who works in the film industry. And in this one, especially for someone that's worked as a dolly grip, there's a couple of really nice payoffs. A dolly makes a number of appearances in this movie, including a scene where he kind of breaks the fourth wall right after a really nice dolly move that's really well matched with his body movement. And then when they do the second take, it's not as much there. So it's about this kind of capturing a moment. There was that one scene to me spoke on such a big picture for the entire movie that I would love to talk about in a little more detail, but I'll refrain from this particular video. When you've seen it, ask me, and then we can talk about it. Um, so I got an extra kick out of that for sure. And I mean, the performances themselves kind of started off a little like, what is this, like caricatures? But as the movie developed, they started developing, and both Brad Pitt and DiCaprio um, had some stellar scenes, some incredible scenes. One particular scene with DiCaprio and this little girl as they're playing these parts in this movie was such a good payoff that it almost brought my wife and I to tears. It was so well done, and DiCaprio just nailed that performance. And then in this kind of in the movie, the real life of the movie, as opposed to the movie set of the movie, Brad Pitt has a scene where he's almost like the lone gunman coming into the town and going up to kind of face off against uh, um, uh, the bad guy to some degree. Really, really well done. The whole atmosphere of that. So it did really nice jobs on a number of different levels. And I thought the pacing was really perfect. It didn't feel like 2 hours and 40 minutes for sure. It flowed really nicely. I can't, even looking back on it now, my biggest pet peeve with a lot of movies, and I'm sure you've all heard me say this a couple of times, um, my biggest pet peeve is these kind of over 2 hour movies. I always feel like, fuck, there's some shit you could have cut out of that. I honestly don't see anything that could have been cut out of this. I was I was there the entire time. I didn't feel that I personally didn't feel that it kind of lapsed into some territory that could have been cut. For my experience, I think everything was necessary. The use of the voiceover was really nice as well too. At a couple of times that they do it to kind of hit these beats and like, okay, we got the basic picture. So then, boom, 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 boom. Now we're here. You know what I mean? Um, I thought that was really well done. So I applaud him. Um, I'm really looking forward to seeing what I believe the next one is his 10th, and I think I think that's when he's calling it quits after his 10th. There has been rumors that he was going to do a Star Trek movie. I don't know. Again, a lot of this stuff I honestly don't follow that closely. Um, as much as I love him as a director and love his movies, I don't follow kind of the latest gossip of what he's working on, that sort of thing. I know that that was a rumor like a year ago or something that he had kind of a fan fiction type of script for Star Trek that apparently had some traction at one point. What the latest is on that, I couldn't tell you. How many feet were there? Dude, there were so many feet. Did you see it? Did you actually go and see it? There was so there was so much feet. And honestly, Feet kind of disgust me. Um, One of the biggest things that I hate about summer is men in flip flops. It just shouldn't happen. Put on some goddamn shoes. Nobody wants to see your gnarly ass feet. And same with some of the women in this one. You know, I guess it's kind of a well known fact that he has a thing for feet. So there was a number of scenes with feet. Whatever. It took me out of it momentarily, but that was okay. That's all right though. Um, yeah. So there you have it. See it at your cheap theater. Yeah, you've just seen reviews. Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, there was a lot of feet. There, no doubt there was a lot of feet. No doubt. Pressed up against windows and right in the forefront of the frame as you're kind of, yeah, it's intense. Dirty feet, clean feet, gnarly feet, all sorts of stuff. Um, if you have a theater in town that's a little more on the sleazy side, or if you have a theater that's in a particular area of town that you don't often visit, I, I beg you, go and see this at that theater. Just go and experience it there. Go during the week when not many people are there. Laugh. We made so much noise during it. Again, it was like when we went to see the double feature, me and a friend of mine, when we went to see the Death Proof Planet Terror. By the time Death Proof was over, we were just hammered. And when Kurt Russell is getting the shit kicked out of him, we were up out of our chairs, cheering and like yelling at the screen. That's what these are about. You know what I mean? His movies and these movies in particular, they're about that. And they played a little clip of an interview. I guess there were some interviews at the Cannes Film Festival, and that's kind of what Tarantino was saying. He's like, I like to make movies that people react to. I don't want you just to sit there and kind of absorb the images and that. I want to get a reaction out of people. I want you to laugh. I want you to stop laughing when I tell you not to laugh. I want you to do all these things. So that's kind of what makes them so fun, and I think that's part of also what was fun about these types of movies when they first came out, especially 42nd Street in New York. You're getting these kind of active crowds that are talking to the screen and yelling at the screen and interacting with the movie as if it was an actual person in front of them. I enjoy that kind of thing. That said, the next thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is the creator of The Witch now has a new movie out, The Lighthouse, and there's a trailer for that that's just come out the other day, today or yesterday. I don't remember when. That's linked on my Twitter page as well. Um, I'm trying not to get into the Hereditary slash Midsummer type of thing because Midsummer was a piece of shit, and that was, even though the first movie was incredible, doesn't necessarily mean the next one's going to be incredible. So I'm trying to keep myself a little more streamlined when it comes to that because The Witch was an amazing movie experience for me, and I've seen it a couple of times now. I own it, and I've loved it every single time. I think I've seen it 3 times now. So I'm trying not to get too ahead of myself with The Lighthouse, but the trailer does look promising. Has a very unique look to it, so that's the next one I'm looking forward to seeing in the theater. Um, with that, that's it. I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'm going to spoil the shit out of this. Let me know when you all have seen it because I do want to hear people's thoughts on it. I'm very curious. Tell me a little bit about your history with Tarantino's films in general. And just, I'd love to hear what people think of this one. That's it. 64-page special. Thank you very much for being here, man. Thanks very much.